Finally, I'll just take a quick run down the Subversion menu so that we can check that we understand how all the various features work. So synchronization with the repository is purely making sure that you are up to date with the latest version of the repository, your working copy is up to date. Commit will commit your changes back to the repository. Update makes your working copy come up to the latest version stored within the repository. So for example, if somebody has made a commit while you have been working on your working copy, you can then update your working copy to that latest version. An update may of course generate a conflict because you may have modified a file which somebody else has modified, and that conflict will be managed in the same way that we saw for merging. You can also update to a specific revision. So for example, if you don't want to update to the head of the particular part of the repository you're working in, then you can do that too. Creating a patch, well, effectively what you're doing here is creating a patch which is a diff or a difference between specific versions of your files within the repository. However, the patch creation here is specifically to create patches which represent differences between the working copy and the last committed version. So in order to see that, we'll need to make a local change within our file. So here we can add a comment, and we now have an updated working copy. I can then create a patch. I'll do it in the workspace for simplicity. I'll place it here. Theoretically, if I'm looking at multiple files and generating a patch for the entire system, then I would want to do recursion. I probably wouldn't want to include binary files. I would want to process both deleted and new files, because of course as I'm making changes I may be adding or removing files from my project, and that needs to be reflected in the difference as well in the patch. So I click on a finish here and I'll have a very simple patch file which appears, and as we can see this is a standard diff format, so it tells me that these are the two files and these are the line numbers that change, and the plus sign here tells me that this line has been added. So generating patches is literally that simple, and once you have a patch of course you can use it as well. So what I could do is close that for a second, revert that file back, and apply a patch. I can then select which files I wish to apply, and it tells me in a very nice way that the patch is going to make the following change to my file. So I can see on the left before and on the right after, and I'll finish, and of course the patch has now remodified my file and I can commit that back. Continuing with the menu from Subversion, so we've looked at creating and using patches. Revert we've used a number of times. Add to version control. If you create a new source file within your project, you need to explicitly tell Subversion that you want it to be put under version control. When you do the import of the initial project, it's automatically done for you. However, you may want to later explicitly choose to have this under version control. The alternative to that is if you have a source file which you do not want to add to version control because it's of a specific type that you want to ignore, you can add it to what's called SVN-ignore. So this is a special Subversion setting or keyword that tells it to ignore certain types of files. We've looked at basic forms of conflicts. These are the conflicts when you generate merges. Tree conflicts are a little bit more complicated, and that's when you've got multiple merges coming in, and we won't cover that here. Markers merged is the way that you tell Subversion that you've resolved a conflict. We've just looked at locks, creating locks, unlocking, and also scanning for locks. And within this tutorial we primarily covered tags, branches, merging and switching between various branches and tags and the trunk. Various information can be provided. For example, we can look at the properties of individual files, and of course we can change those properties and change and set keywords. So keywords such as the revision information, which appears within the header of the source file up here. Showing history, so that's the file history and the way it's changed as it's gone through the repository and has been copied backwards and forwards across branches, for example. And showing annotations, so we can see the changes and who did what when. Copy to is a simple way of moving an individual file or copying an individual file across various parts of the repository, so you can effectively move it through. And export, well, when you check out a working copy within Subversion, there are some special files which are automatically placed in the file system for you, and these are normally hidden within an SVN directory. If you want to do a source release of your product, but of course you don't want to include all the repository information in there, you can do an export, and the export will effectively generate a clean source tree for you without all of the Subversion information in there. Then the last three are some basic maintenance. You could choose to disconnect this project from the repository, in other words it's no longer under version control, should you wish. Sharing projects adds it to the repository if it's not there already. And the last one, cleanup. Cleanup is only really required if you get to a situation where, for whatever reason, your working copy seems to be in a undetermined state with respect to the repository, and you can run cleanup and that will make sure that it's properly synchronized with the repository. That completes the tutorial for the more advanced usage of Subversion within TrueSTUDIO IDE.